The morning sun cast long shadows over Naval Station Norfolk as dockworkers loaded supplies onto the towering hull of the USS Harry S. Truman. Security was tight. Uniformed personnel moved with precision. Civilians, unless cleared, weren't allowed anywhere near the pier. Yet, there she was, a woman in a faded gray hoodie, jeans, and worn sneakers, standing motionless just outside the restricted area, gazing up at the massive aircraft carrier as if it were a cathedral. Her name was Rebecca, but no one knew that yet. She didn't carry a bag, didn't wave or call out, just stared. When a junior sailor noticed her crossing the marked yellow line, he called security, thinking it was just another tourist who wandered too close. But when guards approached, the woman didn't flinch. She stepped forward quietly and placed her hands behind her back. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she whispered, "just needed to see it." Two military police officers exchanged glances. "Ma'am, you can't be here," one of them said, already reaching for the cuffs. "This is a restricted federal zone. Identification, please." She remained silent. Her eyes, however, were locked on the ship's deck. Her lips parted slightly, as though a memory had surfaced. "ID, ma'am," the officer repeated. She shook her head softly. "It was never about ID," she murmured. "I just needed to see where he last stood." That's when the officer's mood shifted. "Suspicion?" one asked, but she said nothing more. They handcuffed her anyway. She didn't struggle or raise her voice. She simply turned her head to watch the waves brush against the dock, tears quietly tracing her weathered cheeks. A few nearby sailors glanced her way but didn't intervene. To them, she was just another drifter, a lost woman, but none of them knew they were handcuffing a ghost. Inside the security booth, her arrest was logged as nonviolent trespass. She sat quietly on the bench, hands cuffed in front of her now. The guards made jokes. One of them mocked her silence. "Maybe she thinks she's some Navy widow or something," he laughed. "Or just another base groupie." The second guard chuckled, sipping coffee, but something about her demeanor unsettled them. Her eyes weren't angry, they were ancient, like someone who had seen too much and returned for closure, not confrontation. When a senior petty officer walked by and glanced at the report, he raised an eyebrow. "No ID, no phone, nothing," the junior replied. "Just said she came to see where someone stood." "Weird, right?" The petty officer nodded. "Strange, yeah, but not criminal." Still, procedure was procedure. She had to be processed and held until naval police finished the paperwork. What no one realized was that a name like hers needed no ID. It just needed a single officer to recognize it. Back on deck, Admiral Thomas Wren was leading a small VIP tour when his radio chirped. "Sir, we have a situation by the pier. Civilian woman in custody. No threat, but odd behavior." He barely reacted. "Just another day at Port Bowen," the attending officer added. "She said something about coming to see where he stood. No ID, no resistance." Wren slowed his pace. Something in that phrasing triggered a memory. "Physical description," he asked. The officer listed off the basics. Gray hoodie, jeans, quiet, older, maybe early 40s. A pause. "You said she was looking at the "Yes, sir. Never stopped looking at it." The Admiral's face darkened. He dismissed the tour group immediately. His steps quickened. In his gut, something twisted. He hadn't heard that voice in nearly a decade. But if it was really her, then they hadn't just handcuffed a civilian, they'd cuffed a legend. Rebecca sat still, the zip of the cuffs biting lightly into her skin. Her fingers were rough, calloused from years of work. The guard station buzzed with normal base chatter, but she wasn't listening. Her mind was on Kandahar, on the memory of heat, sand, rotor blades, and explosions that ripped across the sky like lightning. She had survived, barely, declared Mia, presumed dead, but she had never corrected the record. She'd wanted peace, wanted out. The Navy had been her home, but the war had broken parts of her soul she never found the courage to rebuild. And now, years later, something inside had called her back. Not to fight, but to feel. To stand where she had once saluted. To see the steel she had bled for. And maybe, just maybe, to say goodbye to someone only she remembered. The door slammed open, and in strode Admiral Wren. The guards stood at attention immediately. "Where is she?" he demanded. They pointed to the bench. The Admiral turned, and time stopped. "Rebecca," he said quietly. She raised her head slowly. Their eyes met. Wren's face changed in an instant. Shock. Disbelief. "My God," he whispered. "You're alive." One of the guards looked confused. "Sir, do you, know her?" The Admiral didn't answer right away. He walked toward her slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. "Sergeant Rebecca Miles," he said with reverence. "Explosive ordnance disposal. USS Truman, Operation Odyssey Dawn, Bronze Star, Purple Heart." The entire room fell silent. "The woman in the hoodie. Her untie her," Wren ordered. "Right now." The guards rushed to obey, embarrassed now, fumbling with the keys. Rebecca rubbed her wrists, not out of pain, but reflection. Wren stood before her, shaking his head. "We thought you were gone. You disappeared after the blast in 2015. She nodded faintly. That was the point, she replied. But today, I needed to remember. Ren swallowed hard. You saved a lot of us that day, including me. He turned to the guards. You cuffed a war hero, a woman who trained me in demolition clearance. You owe her more than an apology. The guards nodded nervously. Yes, sir. Rebecca stood, her legs steady despite the weight of the past. Ren placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Would you like to come aboard? Her eyes welled up. One last time, she whispered. The Admiral led her out himself, no longer a trespasser, but a sister-in-arms returning home. As they approached the gangway, sailors stepped aside instinctively, sensing something different in the air. Ren didn't explain who she was, but his presence at her side was enough. A few older veterans on deck glanced at her and did a double-take. One whispered, that can't be. But it was. The woman who disappeared. The one who dismantled bombs in the Afghan dust without flinching. The one who volunteered for every dangerous clearance, not because she was reckless, but because she refused to let anyone else get hurt. She hadn't returned for medals or praise. She came back for closure. For the steel. For the deck that once felt like solid ground after chaos. The very place where she'd once said goodbye to her best friend, a sailor who never made it back. As she stepped onto the USS Truman once again, it was not as a civilian, but as one of its own. Took her to the flight deck. Wind whipped her hair gently as she stared out across the horizon. Everything had changed. The gear, the crew, the command, but the ship itself. It was still there, unmoving, familiar. Ren stood beside her, arms crossed. We would have held a ceremony if we'd known. She shook her head. No need. I didn't want to welcome, just a moment. He nodded. Take all the time you need. She walked to the railing, placed her hand on the cold steel, and closed her eyes. For a brief second, the world quieted. The sound of boots, helicopters, alarms all faded, and in their place came silence. Not the kind that haunts, but the kind that heals. She took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something other than survival. She had been gone, but not forgotten. And now, she had come full circle. Ren finally broke the silence. Where have you been all this time? He asked gently. Rebecca opened her eyes, still facing the sea. Alaska, mostly, changed my name, built a quiet life. I fix snowmobiles now. He smiled faintly. From dismantling warheads to fixing sleds. Peace, she said simply. Some of us weren't built to stay. He nodded. But you came back, because a piece of me never left. They stood like that for a while. Two soldiers who had once worn the same patch, now united by memory. Below deck, whispers spread. The ghost had returned, but not for vengeance or noise. Just remembrance. When she finally turned to leave, she looked stronger than she had when she arrived. Not because of recognition, but because she had faced the place that held her pain, and she'd walked through it, head held high. Rebecca stepped carefully down the interior stairs of the USS Truman, her hand grazing the cold railing as if confirming it was still real. The passageways hadn't changed much. Sterile, sharp corners, echoes of boots passed. Her feet moved almost automatically. Muscle, memory guiding her. Admiral Ren followed a few steps behind, giving her space. A few young sailors passed, offering confused but respectful nods. They didn't know who she was, but they sensed the weight she carried. This was the ladder well where I passed Petty Officer Ruiz that morning, she murmured, mostly to herself. He had just gotten coffee. Told me it tasted like jet fuel. She smiled faintly. He never made it home. Ren paused. He remembered Ruiz too. Rebecca stopped at a bulkhead with faded chalk markings. Her fingers hovered over them, trembling. We used to draw tally marks here for every safe landing on deck. She inhaled deeply. I never got to finish mine. They reached the berthing area, quiet in the early afternoon. Rebecca's boots echoed through the narrow corridor until she stopped at a hatch marked EOD ordnance. She hesitated, then pushed it open. The room was different now. New lockers, new names, but the energy was the same, focused, tense, reverent. She ran her hand along a table edge. This is where I packed my kit before Kandahar, she whispered. I still remember the checklist. Scissors, snips, zipcord. Ren stood in the doorway silently, allowing her this sacred moment. We never replaced your nameplate, he said softly. She turned, surprised. Why not? Some things don't get replaced, he replied. They just stay waiting to be honored. Her eyes watered again, but she wiped them away quickly. I didn't come back to be honored, she said. I came because I thought I forgot how to feel. But I never really did. Ren nodded solemnly. You've earned your silence. Later that day, Ren arranged a quiet moment at the memorial wall below deck. No speeches, no cameras, just him, Rebecca, and a single folded flag placed beside a plaque of fallen sailors. You were listed among them, Ren said, but I had a feeling. Rebecca looked at her name etched in brass. Seeing it there makes it real, she said. But I'm not dead, not all of me. She reached into her pocket and removed an old Navy challenge coin. It was tarnished, but still intact. This belonged to my CO. He gave it to me the day before we deployed, said if you come back alive, return it to the sea. She looked at Ren. Do you think it's time? He nodded. If you're ready. Together, they walked back to the deck. The wind had picked up. Rebecca stood at the edge, held the coin to her chest, and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." Then she let it fall into the ocean, let the coin vanish beneath the waves. But its meaning rippled through the air around her. For Rebecca, it wasn't about death or resurrection, it was about release. The sound of the ocean, the creaking of the hull, the salt in the wind, it all felt like closure. She stood quietly for a few more seconds before turning to Ren. "That was the last thing I came for," she said. "The rest is yours." But Ren shook his head. "We're just getting started. You think you walked away from the Navy, but the Navy never walked away from you." She tilted her head, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "I've kept tabs, your survival. The work you've done with homeless vets in Alaska, the mechanical projects. You may have disappeared from the headlines, but not from history." Rebecca didn't know what to say. Her life had been lived in silence for so long, he had forgotten what it meant to be seen. Back in the officer's wardroom, Ren poured 2 glasses of black coffee just the way she used to like it. "You remember that?" she asked, smiling faintly. "Of course," he said. "You used to say sugar made your hands shaky." They sipped in silence for a moment. "The Trumans being reassigned for a peacekeeping mission," Ren said. "We'll be rotating a new generation of specialists on board, but I've petitioned for something special." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" Ren opened a folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a certificate, Honorary Lifetime Naval Advisor, Rebecca Miles. Her throat tightened. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I didn't come back for medals or titles." Ren nodded. "I know, that's why you deserve it." He paused. "Every ship needs a ghost, a memory that walks its halls, reminding people what courage looks like, and I can't think of anyone better." As evening fell, Rebecca stood once more on the Truman's deck, the golden light casting her silhouette long across the steel. Sailors passed her without knowing, but some looked twice. There was something in her stance, the quiet dignity, the stillness of someone who had known both chaos and peace. She didn't need applause. Her story was stitched into every bolt of this ship. As she watched the harbor lights flicker on, a young female sailor approached shyly. "Ma'am, are you the one from the Kandahar team?" Rebecca looked at her and smiled gently. "Yes." The sailor's eyes widened. "My brother used to talk about you, said you saved 3 lives before you vanished." Rebecca placed a hand on her shoulder. "He saved me more than once, too." The sailor nodded and walked away, but her face carried something new: pride, reverence. Rebecca exhaled. Maybe this was her legacy. Quiet, powerful, unspoken. The next morning, she packed her small bag and prepared to leave. Ren met her at the pier. "I arranged a car to take you wherever you need," he offered. She shook her head. "I'll walk." Just like I walked in. They shook hands. "You'll always have a place here," he said. She gave a small salute, one more for memory than for formality. As she walked down the dock, civilian clothes rustling in the breeze, something unexpected happened. One by one, sailors lining the gangway straightened and raised their hands in silent salute. Not because they were told to, but because they felt it. Word had spread. The ghost of USS Truman had returned. And she'd left a message behind without speaking a single speech. Rebecca didn't turn back. She didn't need to. That chapter was closed. But her presence, her story would remain long after she was gone, far away from the base. Back in Alaska, Rebecca unlocked the garage where she repaired snowmobiles and motorcycles. The place smelled of oil and old rubber, but it was home. On the far wall, she added a new photo, a snapshot someone had taken from the Truman's deck, her silhouette against the sea, the flag behind her waving proudly. Below it, she taped a note: "Don't forget who you are, even if the world does." Her dog trotted in, tail wagging, and she smiled as she tossed a wrench onto the workbench. The past hadn't broken her. It had simply paused her. And now, finally, she was moving again. Not to be honored, not to be recognized, just to live, fully, completely, freely. Weeks later, a letter arrived by mail. It was from Admiral Wren. Inside was a smaller box. Inside that, a bronze ship's bolt from the USS Truman, engraved with the words, "For Rebecca Miles, who never truly left." He placed it gently on the shelf, between her father's compass and a photo of her unit. No tears this time, just a smile. Because sometimes the most powerful victories happen not on the battlefield but in the quiet return home.